Hello and welcome to the first video shot in the new workshop. So last time I pretty much got it done, got it all painted, and now I've moved in here. One of the reasons I was desperate to get a new workshop was because all my tools were being kept in the house, in the kitchen and the living room, so I could finally get them moved in. I had this black unit that I used to store all my Stanley cases, so I could get that brought in, and then the tools themselves. Moving things like the bandsaw is incredibly difficult, and moving it back and forth is not good for the tools, and I don't think it's good for me. So I'm really pleased for this to be the last time of doing it. And it's exactly the same for the pillar drill. That thing's got some weight to it. To move the bench, I had to take it apart because it was too big and too heavy to move. I just unscrewed the top and took the vise off. Then I could get it brought in and put back together. Now, I didn't film it because I didn't know if it'd work out, but I've made some modifications to the bench. The top was made out of 5 slabs that weren't attached together. There was a gap between them, and this is an interior-exterior grade bench, so I guess the gaps were there on purpose so that water could run between them. But what had happened is they'd all moved slightly and were no longer flat. Now, I could have just flattened it, but I would still have the problem with gaps in between, and I don't like gaps in my bench. I've tried MFT style benches with the holes in, and I just find the shelf under it gets covered in sawdust and wood shavings. So I wanted to solve both these problems, and what I did is I got the track saw out and tried to cut along the gaps on both sides to open them up to a consistent 1 centimetre. Then I ripped down some 3x2s into 1 centimetre strips, applied loads of glue, bashed them in, and then I planed the whole thing flat. And that seems to have worked really well. And then I got 3 coats of some Tung oil on it. This is my favourite stuff to use, so I'll put a link to this down below. So that was quite a lot of work, but having a bench that's flat and with no holes in is much better. I made some simple little frames out of some scraps of MDF and painted them black and got them installed around the windows just to finish those off. Now, this workshop has a single pitch roof, slopes down that way, so I needed some guttering, so I've just got some plastic guttering that I've installed and a downpipe, and it all drains to a drain that's in the centre of the road, and that seems to work well. We've had quite a lot of rain and it's performing fine. Now, when I was insulating this, I commented on how great it sounded in here with just the insulation in the walls. It really deadened the sound. It sounded blooming great. And then I boarded it all with the MDF and the sound echoed around and it sounded awful in here, which I knew would happen because it was the same when I built the garden room. So I wanted to make some acoustic panels. I made some simple wooden frames, again, out of some scraps of MDF. This stuff was probably a bit too thin, but it worked. And I've made them just slightly smaller than a panel of the Rockwall 50mm acoustic insulation. I can then lay out the fabric I bought online and get the frames laid out onto them. Then the insulation gets packed in. I can trim the fabric so it's just slightly bigger than the frame, get it pulled over on all 4 sides and stapled into place. I made 3 of these and then I could get them screwed to the ceiling, and that's them done. And now I'm using them in here, recording audio. It sounds so much better. the best thing for audio is soft surfaces. So these 3 panels above my head, but I wanted something on the floor as well, and I bought myself a cheap runner. Well, I say cheap, this was about £30, but I like the style of it. You could probably get one about the same size for under a tenner. So it's going to do a couple of things. I actually really like the look of it. It's going to help deaden the sound, and I've got it right in front of my workbench, so I'm going to be stood on a nice carpet. Luxury. And if it gets dirty, it's so small and easy just to take outside and shake out. So before I show you around, even though it's a bit of a mess, it's definitely not done in here yet, I'm going to answer a couple of the most common questions. Question 1 is going to be a hard one to answer, and that's the cost. It's a hard one to answer because I tried to use as much material as I had on hand. So it would be behind me is where I had the tent, and I'd made a wooden floor for that, and I used all the timbers and the boards for that floor to do the base and the floor of this, and most of the ceiling and roof of this. So I didn't have to buy any of that. I had a bit of insulation left over from the garden room and a few other bits. Most of the screws I had already, so it's hard to give you a price, but what I spent was £1,500. So I should think if you had to buy all the bits that I had already, it would come in at just over £2,000 to build this, which is 2.4 metres wide by 4 metres long. Now, cost was a big consideration, and I tried to keep it down every way possible. But something always people ask me is, what would I do differently? And there isn't much, but there's one place where I wish I'd spent a little extra money, and that was with a roofing kit. The rubber roof, I did one on the garden room last year, and I thought it was a great system. I looked at the prices this year. Of course, they've gone up. Everything's gone up. But I found a different system from another manufacturer, and instead of the plastic trims, it had metal trims, but you had to put battens around the outside. But it was about a £50 saving. And I thought, yeah, I'll try that, but I much preferred the plastic one. I liked the look. It was much easier to install. That's the one place I wish I'd spent the extra. But at the time, I didn't know that. And I'm not going to rip the roof off and redo it. It's just, I would go for that one. I'm not going to put links to them. You just go onto eBay and search rubber roof and you will see them. So what's left to do in here? Well, not much actually. I've got to organise it, but we'll come on to that in a minute. The one thing I do need to think about is perhaps security. I've got a nice 5-lever mortise lock in the door, very happy with that, but I've got big windows. Now, I really like the natural light and I feel pretty secure here, but I might do something about the windows. Someone suggested putting a film over them with a mirror on it, like you tint a car window. Well, I suppose you can't have mirrored on a car, probably. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. So that would be a cheap and easy thing to do, I imagine, and it would just mean no one can look in, but I can look out. Previously, I've put bars on the window. They're reasonably expensive to do, and my temptation is always to use them as storage and hang things on them, so then you start blocking the windows. So if I'm going to do that, I might as well just make my own kind of bars and use, really just make some tool storage to go over the windows. Okay, people could smash the windows and nick all the chisels or whatever that are over them, but it would make it much harder for anyone to actually get in here. You're never going to make this Fort Knox. People, if they want to break in, they will break in. You just got to make it as hard as possible. So that's something I'm going to think about and definitely sort out, and perhaps I'll do an update on my next vlog on what I've done for that. So then we come to storage and organisation. Now, I talked about this with Keith from Rag and Bone Brown on our podcast the other week. So we brainstormed some ideas. I've got lots of tools that are all under the bench at the moment, and I think I've still got some in the house. I would like them on the walls. I'd like them on the walls for a few reasons. I don't work on site or anything, so my tools just really stay in here, so it's much more practical to be able to grab them off a shelf or a tool holder on the wall. And I like the look. I personally like the look of it, but also obviously I make YouTube videos, and I think having a workshop that has the tools on display looks good. So that's my plan. So I think the next few videos are going to be all about workshop organisation, because I've got to get these all on the wall and come up with some ideas on how to do it. So I think that's everything I've got to go through on my list. So now I'll just show you kind of how I've got everything at the moment in here. Right, so this is the back wall of the workshop, and then, well, I suppose it depends the orientation. The side wall has this rack on that I made. Underneath it is the Stanley cases that I use. The top of it, shelves that I just knocked up out of some MDF and OSB and painted it all black. I'm not a big fan of shelves in the workshop, but the idea of this was the colour in the tent workshop, the green, made it very difficult for filming. So what I did was I built this, put it on the back wall, and at least then one wall wasn't green. But what I think I'll do in here is lose this top back part, and I will maybe make a clamp rack to go above it. But yeah, you'll see about that in a future video. So then along from that shelving unit, we've got the Axminster Professional bandsaw. Next to that, I've got the Trend router table. And then I've got the pillar drill here. Down on the floor, I've got the planer and dust extractor and dust separator. It all needs organising, but it all fits along here with plenty of room. Right, moving over to this wall with the windows, I've got the table saw on the stand here with the little vac above it, EcoFlow down there, and then we're back to the bench along this wall. So that's the workshop built and all the tools moved in here. Now I've just got to use it to make something. So thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, and please subscribe for more videos.